Hey everyone, and welcome to what I think is going to be a very exciting video, because the first episode of Afterlives has came out, and it's pretty much the prequel series of animatics for the Shadowlands expansion. And man, there's a lot of lore to analyze in this one in particular. Lots of overt things, yes, but also I would say just as much is residing in between the lines as we learn about Uther's journey from death to his most recent, but I'd very much say probably not final, confrontation with Arthas. And certainly, if these are anything like Battle for Azeroth's Warbringer series, then yeah, you can be pretty sure that this stuff is going to be teasing future storylines for the expansion, so it is worth really diving into. And then just a quick thing, it is just the end of August now, and over on Patreon, of course, it's Monk Month, so if you'd like the Monk class pin, as well as a host of art for your wall, then you can check that out. Patrons, thank you for everything, and with that said, let's get into the video. We're going to kick it off in very broad strokes with the return of Arthas, because yes, this is about the Kyrian Covenant, but in reality it is far more about Arthas and Uther and their journey together. And yeah, that means that Arthas is kind of back. Now, he has been heavily teased in interviews, Blizzard developers have been saying, Arthas, yeah, he probably went to the Maw, and now we've literally seen that. We know that Arthas' soul is in the Maw, and of course, the Maw is a place that we go to in this expansion. And I think just the existence of this shows us something that's very, very clear, and that is that Uther and Arthas' journey is going to be one that we will explore through this expansion. And then what I would say is that for the expansion to do that, and for it to not feel like an aside or a side story, Blizzard are probably going to be trying to deepen the canonical link between the Lich King and the Jailer. And as we go through this, as we basically go through and analyze this together, I think that's one of the things you're really going to see, that Blizzard are laying a lot of very important groundwork. So let's actually get into some of that groundwork. The nature of Frostmourne. Now, this is something that's not necessarily in this, but it's extremely important you understand, because most people don't know this. So yeah, this whole thing makes sense if you know about the true origins of the Lich King. We originally thought it was more of a Legion creation, and it was kind of the Dreadlords who, made that stuff, but as it actually turns out, Frostmourne and the Helm of Domination were stolen from the Shadowlands by the Dreadlords. The Dreadlords knew a fair bit about the Shadowlands, and yes, they stole those two artifacts from the Maw, likely from Torghast, as they were crafted by the Runecrafter who resides there. And of course, the Runecrafter is a character that we will get to know as we go through the expansion. Now, what that means is that Frostmourne and the Helm were just artifacts of the Shadowlands, right? Made in the Maw. They clearly will have had some sort of powers relevant to the Maw. And I think that's a very, very obvious link. Could it actually be that the Jailer was more than happy for the Dreadlords to take it because the Jailer wanted a bit of power on the outside? Hard to know. But clearly, right, we have Arthas's, the gear that really defined him. That is something that comes from the Maw, and I think that's going to be very relevant as we go through this video. And to do that, let's hop over and talk about Arthas's death and, whether he is indeed an agent of the Maw, and just the agency that Arthas the human had. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to remember that Arthas says something before he says, "I see only darkness before me." That's the line that they played again in this video. But just before that, of course, when he died at Icecrown Citadel back in Wrath of the Lich King, well, what does he do? He looks up to the spirit of his father and he asks his father, "Is it over?" Now, that was always kind of a weird thing. If Arthas, this guy, knew entirely what he was doing. So that he looked to his father and just asked, "Is it over? I see only darkness before me." Well, that does make you think, and it certainly made me think at the time, that for Arthas, now that he has, he has no helm and the sword is broken, it's like he sort of woke up from a waking nightmare that was tormenting him. That's one of the reads a lot of people had, and I think it's actually quite possible that that's something that's going to be really doubled down on. I think there's a decent amount of evidence as we go through this. Now, we had always been told that it was in fact the last of Arthas's humanity that held the Scourge back from totally wiping out Azeroth. And we also know that really Frostmourne's first victim was Arthas's own soul. It wounded Arthas's soul, and I have to wonder then, is that in a similar way to how it wounded Uther's soul, as we see in Afterlives? And that does make you wonder what's going to be the state of Arthas now that he's in the Maw. Just how much of Arthas did Frostmourne claim there? What was really going on? I mean, Bolvar, when we talked to him very, very much at the beginning of Shadowlands, he talks about there being another dark consciousness in the helm, and that's the jailer. Now, could it actually be that the jailer was more in control than we thought there? You know, like the whole idea of the power struggle that was going on within the helm for, which personality really got to be the one that expressed itself outwardly. I think that's something we might need to revisit now that we know that, that helm, the Helm of Domination, was clearly made in the Maw, almost certainly for the jailer, and then found its way onto this dude called Arthas. I mean, surely there is something going on there. And that does make me wonder, will Blizzard attempt to separate Arthas the Man from Arthas the Lich King? I mean, let's get into it. Devos, the Kyrian paragon that we see in the video, she describes Arthas as an agent of the Maw. So that's how she sees Arthas, an agent of the Maw, which would sort of suggest under the jailer's thumb. And that does make you wonder, was Arthas consciously working for the jailer? Did he just happen to be useful to the jailer, so the jailer was happy for him to keep on doing whatever he was doing? Or was it a situation where the jailer was able to influence Arthas's mind to a degree where Arthas was not 100% fully in control of his own actions? It certainly does make you think about a lot of things. Here's one of them. I would call out the fact that Arthas, as soon as he became the Lich King and he had both Frostmourne and the Helm, what did he do? Well, he rebuilt the whole ICC area out of Saronite, and he built it to resemble Torghast. To resemble Torghast, right? And I guess the Maw as well, because, Icecrown Citadel looks like Torghast. They're kind of like, they're almost mirrors of each other. So, Icecrown Citadel was a miniature Torghast, complete with, I would speculate, a miniature Maw within Frostmourne sucking up souls. And if that's the case, then, it does make you wonder, how much was Arthas in control there? What was really going on? I mean, Arthas was probably aware of a whole bunch of this stuff. And certainly if you are going to be exploring that, one thing I'd love to know is a little bit more about the connection between Arthas and Yogg-Saron, because that's something that Blizzard actually in Blue Posts have said that they wanted to get across in the Wrath expansion, but never actually really successfully did it. So I wonder if we'd learn more there. Now, in terms of other things like Frostmourne, let's think about it. Frostmourne grew more powerful as it consumed more souls. And that's actually just like how the jailer became more powerful as souls poured into the Maw. So then you have to wonder, is Frostmourne essentially like a miniature Maw on Azeroth, one that, existed to weaken the mind of its wielder, damage his soul, and perhaps grant the jailer an agent of death? Was it, in fact, the jailer's original plan to take Azeroth by Arthas? Was that actually his plan? I mean, if so, then some lore does get a bit strange, because Arthas, as the Lich King, we are told anyway, was concerned by existential threats to Azeroth, such as the Legion. He basically felt that the whole world, united in undeath, would be the best way to fend off a bunch of these threats. Now, if that's what we know from Chronicle, how does that gel with the idea of him, being an agent of the Maw? It's kind of tricky there. Maybe there's some lore Blizzard will need to just massage out. But going back to the death of Arthas, we see that shot where Frostmourne kind of powers down, and that does also make me think, what's the implication of that? Because if Frostmourne, if it functions a bit like the Maw, what happens when it breaks and the souls leave? I mean, thus far, we've not actually seen Arthas' victims appear in the Shadowlands, and if Frostmourne damaged the soul of Arthas, right, when it was, when he wielded it first, and then it was destroyed, did that repair Arthas' soul before he then, died, and we'll see what happened to him very shortly in this video? Is that something that happened? So that's another bit of food for thought. And then also, I guess there is one thing where the shards were, of course, reforged into the Death Knight legendary weapon, so that's a bit spicy. But overall, I'd say my lingering thought is, on what the Maw would be like for Arthas, right? Once he actually goes in there. If he was an agent of the jailer, then how would he be treated? Or was Arthas merely just a vessel for the jailer? A vessel that, of course, was enabled by Arthas' own fears, insecurities, and, just problems with who he was in life. But is it the case that then the last of Arthas' humanity mounted resistance to the jailer within the Helm, which we're kind of already told did happen? If that's the case, then is Arthas in for a real big bit of torture? It's kind of tricky to say, but there's a lot of things here where I think you can tell that, if they are true, and it really seems like they are as Blizzard tries to mount up the evidence here, then we are just going to have this new wave of just what does Arthas mean, which is something that in some ways is exciting and could get people back. But of course, you're on thin ice. It's Arthas. If you mess him up, you're in, it's not going to work out that well. Then the other thing, I guess, is, if the Arthas plan failed, then, you know, what happened directly after that as far as the jailer goes. And, you know, if it is true that Arthas is an agent of the Maw, as Davos says, well, right as that agent was thwarted, what happened? The jailer found a new one, Sylvanas, of course, in the Edge of Night novella. So you can kind of see how there's this like timeline of really the agents that the jailer is kind of using to get done whatever he wants. Alright, with Arthas done, let's talk a little bit about Uther, and especially his death, because right when he dies, you can see his soul's kind of split. Some of it's taken by Frostmourne, but the rest, which, by the way, is the same color as the light, well, that obviously goes to the Shadowlands, because that's how Uther ended up there. Now, I have to wonder then, is this because of, like, Uther's strength in the light? Is it because Frostmourne actually wounds souls before they enter the Shadowlands, maybe for some sort of dark purpose, so they already go there? Overall, I would say that I do actually think that Frostmourne just acted like a miniature Maw, and I think it's far more the case that Uther's devotion to the light is basically what caused the light to protect most of his soul. And given, as an example, Crusader Bridenbard, I think we can, we can see that the light can sort of counteract like the Maw originating undead stuff. And the whole thing of light and void in this expansion is also kind of interesting, because as you go through Shadowlands, you'll notice there's a bit of a void incursion somewhere, and there's also, some light stuff going on. Now, we do have a Kyrian NPC who tells us that, oh, the light and void, they've got no purchase here. But I have to wonder if that's just more of the same Kyrian stupidity and arrogance that I think really this Afterlives video is showing us, and we'll get onto the stupidity of the Kyrians soon enough and what that all means. Now, going back to the death of Uther, there is a funny little thing here where, of course, Uther says, "I dearly hope there's a special place in hell waiting for you." To which Arthas says, "We may never know, Uther. I intend to live forever." Well, it turns out there was a special place in hell, and really, Uther is the man who made it for him and actually dropped him into it. Okay, we can assume that Arthas would have went to the Maw based on how he existed in life. But whatever happened there, it's clearly the situation where Uther was raised up early so that, as soon as the Arbiter passed that judgment on Arthas, it would be Uther to drop him into it. So I think that's a bit spicy, a little bit of a callback. Now, speaking of the Maw, I think we have to talk about the darkness, because, well, it's a bit weird, right? Davos just generically says, in response to Uther talking about, his evil, meaning Arthas, Davos just generically says, the darkness was sealed in the Maw long ago, and that it would be impossible for it to leak out. Now, this is something that, is really wild, because at that point, Davos doesn't actually know anything about Arthas, because later on, Davos asks Uther what the hell's going on, and that is the time when Uther tells Davos about Arthas. So, yeah, that was just them generically talking about, oh, anything bad happening in the Maw? Impossible. It's like a black hole. Nothing can escape. And of course, that arrogance that Davos showed at the very start of the video, of course, Davos then comes to not believe that sort of that line. But, her original logic is, of course, echoed back at her by the Archon, who is just kind of like, nah, couldn't be happening. And obviously that's then what makes Davos and Uther feel a little bit, split away from the rest of the Kyrians, and why they go a bit rogue. So I then have to wonder if when Davos was talking about the darkness at the very start of this video, is she actually hinting at the ancient lore of the Shadowlands? The darkness was locked away long ago, right? The Maw, nothing can escape it. Which then makes me think, was there a great struggle that perhaps ended with the jailer being locked away? And that's the darkness that they're talking about. I actually think it very much could be. And that does bring me on to another sort of thing of not rocking the boat, right? You can't call the Arbiter's choice into question, because that's what Davos does, and the other Kyrians very much like, oh, you don't want to be thinking about that sort of thing. And it's the whole thing where they have to stick to the path all the time. The aspirants have got to stick to the path of purging who they are so that they can serve. You've got the purpose going on that, everybody follows in Oribos. Now, here's the thing that I would say. The Archon knows the full context of everything. The Archon is in the pantheon of death, and from what we understand, that's a pantheon in the same way the Titans are the pantheon, meaning that any time that these underlings come and they talk to the Archon about this darkness and evil escaping the Maw, is the Archon being totally truthful whenever she says, oh, it's nothing, don't worry about it, abandon this course of thought? Or, is that just the Archon kind of saying that? But actually, as a member of the Pantheon of Death, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. I mean, Blizzard have actually teased us that really, it's going to be about, like, what do the Pantheon of Death characters actually choose to tell us about what's going on. So clearly the likes of the Archon and the Winter Queen, they go back majorly probably to the time of the first ones, who are another wild group that we've just heard about. So yeah, I imagine there's interesting things going on there, but certainly there's a lot of, like, just a lot of following rules, and I think that our freedom is really going to be our strength, and that's a lot of what Blizzard is going to be sort of doing with our role in the Shadowlands. And speaking of that, let's just talk about the future. You know, how's this story setting up the future of the expansion? Well, Uther has got a pretty clear problem. He's got a damaged soul, and I don't think that dropping Arthas into the maw is going to make his soul better all of a sudden. So I think there's going to be some sort of character arc about Uther repairing his soul. Maybe him sort of renouncing his desire for that justice and maybe starting to see the bigger picture. Who knows? Will Uther try to lead a crusade into the maw to rescue Arthas or something weird? I don't know. I could see Blizzard doing it, but I could also see it being rather controversial if they decided to. Now, there is some stuff in the Kyrian Covenant campaign and the Frostmourne, which, you can tell that Uther and Devos aren't exactly going to be the best friends of the Archon after what they did in this little cinematic. So yeah, there's a lot of story there. I'm going to leave that for the expansion sort of discussions, though, because a lot of people will be watching this video and they probably won't want the level 60 campaign to be spoiled for them. So there's that. Right, the other thing we know, Arthas, he can be found in the maw. Now, he's likely at the tallest levels of Torghast, and certainly that's not a place that we can go to in patch 9.0, but it's probably somewhere where we will go, and it does make you think about the, idea of an Arthas redemption, because there's a lot of things where we were already wondering, why did Arthas look up at his dad and say, "Is it over?" as if he was waking up from, a waking nightmare? Why did Arthas say that? And we had all of these lingering thoughts about what was really going on, and, we learned more about the Dreadlords stealing Frostmourne and the Helm, and then in this video, right, what happens? Blizzard starts to really make it clear to us that, at least from the perspective of some of these Shadowlands characters, they see Arthas as an agent of the Maw. And I think that is just something that's pretty interesting. It just goes back to that discussion we had about what was Arthas's, agency, How much of him was there, and how does that tie into the older lines that we know about it being, the last of Arthas's humanity that, is really what prevented the Lich King, I suppose, persona from just wiping Azeroth out with the Scourge. Tricky to know, certainly this is going to be going in big places. I mean, doing an Arthas redemption, it would be like he's one of the only WoW villains that's not had some form of redemption or expansion of who their character is. But, that's also playing with fire, right? Can he just not be one of those last true villains, right? This guy who, fell because of his arrogance and all of those things. And certainly doing an Arthas redemption is going to be really damn hard, because he was an absolute dickhead before he took up Frostmourne. That's kind of the point, right? He's got a lot to atone for, even outside of his Lich King business, What he did with just, Stratholme, burning the boats, killing the mercenaries that he sort of got to burn the boats, all of that stuff. I mean, Arthas was a total dick, so I wonder how they're going to, deal with any of that. But certainly, they've set it up that we can find Arthas again, and that'll certainly get people talking. That's my current thoughts on this storyline. It will get people talking. Will it be for good or for ill? Hard to say, but I do think that Blizzard know they need to treat Arthas as a character with the utmost respect and not, mess up something that was left in generally a pretty okay spot. So, interesting stuff. And that's it for this video. Of course, do let me know what you think about things down in those comments. If you'd like some sweet monk loot that you can wear and put in your wall, then you can check out Patreon for the next few days, which is, that's what's running up to the end of August. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you very much for watching today's video, and I will see you next time.